Welcome to Queer Kid Stuff. I'm Lindsay, and this is my best friend Ted. Today, we're talking about the T in LGBT.
Tell us what you guys identify as. We're asking everyone.
I don't know. Gender neutral or gender fluid. I think that's what they said. I don't know. I'm confused.
So you identify as gender fluid?
I don't know.
She, her, it. I feel like honestly, it should not be a bad thing.
I don't know. I'm confused.
Welcome back to the channel. This is Anna's Thoughts and Musical Parodies, and I am Anna, your hostess. Thanks for being here today.
On theme with today's video, I have a brand new design in the merch store. I shared the concept for this design on Instagram and a bunch of people liked it, so I decided to go for it, and we now have a t-shirt and some stickers. The link is on the second page of the website in the description. Thank you so much in advance to anyone who decides to support, and now let's get all the way into today's video.
So as we are all aware of, and as it's pretty much impossible to not be aware of, it's that time again. It's the month of June, Gay Pride Month.
We'll convert your children.
Back off from the children.
Happens bit by bit, quietly and subtly, and you will barely notice it.
You remind me of a snake, and if you don't back off, you just might regret it.
But did you know, or were you aware, that this month is also supposed to be PTSD Awareness Month? I guess there's a particular day of the month that's dedicated to PTSD awareness, but it's also supposed to be the whole month. So it's interesting how we pretty much never hear about that. I feel like I knew that at some point before, but I was only reminded of it this year because a couple of people on Instagram were posting about it. You know, how there's a whole month dedicated to people flaunting their sexuality, but only one day dedicated to, you know, honoring people with PTSD, such as tend to be people who were in the military, who were serving our country. You know, it's pretty skewed. It's also pretty ironic to me that the majority of homosexual or transgender, especially transgender people, have been victims of trauma themselves, usually as a child. There are just so many case studies, you know, people in those communities who have told their stories of how they were sexually abused as children, and then they, you know, ended up turning out the way that they are now. I mean, you can even take it from this transgender affirming therapist who admits that it is possible that trauma can cause gender dysphoria.
And is it possible for trauma to lead to gender dysphoria? Yes, it absolutely is. Anything is possible, especially in psychology, trust me.
And sadly, it seemed like pretty much every single person in her comments had experienced some type of trauma in their lives and was also either questioning or, you know, in disagreement with their God-given gender. And here are a couple very telling comments. I've been through a ton of trauma, and one of my therapists insisted my gender dysphoria was directly caused by sexual trauma. And lastly, about a year ago when I was still in denial, I started wondering whether my trauma was linked to what I was feeling. I did research and found those transphobic articles and studies you mentioned that prove being trans is just the result of trauma. Their sense of self, their identity has been skewed to something untrue.
What about a transgender?
Eh?
Transgender?
No.
No?
It will look like if you want to become a lady but you're a man, you have something wrong in your mind. Something wrong in your family, something wrong in you. For a man, he has a penis. For a woman, he has a vagina. So we know this is a lady, this is a man.
And instead of, you know, focusing on helping those people to get back in touch with their true selves and to find God ultimately, we are glorifying the result of the trauma that they went through. It's pretty ironic, isn't it? It's also a fact that there are a large number of gay men who are the perpetrators of child R-word, and there's a strong correlation between the two. So as you can see, this is something called generational trauma. These people were traumatized that way often when they were children, and now they're passing that trauma on to other children who they come into contact with. So since I'm sure you're wondering what you just witnessed there, maybe didn't have time to read the caption or just didn't believe your eyes, yes, that was a child drag queen, a drag kid, whatever they want to call it. And they were dancing for tips for adults. But to me, this is a prime example of what I was just talking about generational trauma coming full circle. I'm sure even just back, 3 decades ago when I was growing up in the 90s, this would have been looked at with the type of horror that everyone should be looking at it with now. But there are too many people these days who will celebrate this just because it has to do with homosexuality, and homosexuality has been looked down upon, and so we need to celebrate it in every way possible. But this is way over the line. I'm sure a lot of people would agree. I know some gay people agree with that. And honestly, homosexuality in itself is not even something that is right by God. And again, instead of doing something about that, we are glorifying the symptoms of the trauma, which is the homosexuality and the transgenderism and all that. As a survivor of domestic abuse and somebody with PTSD myself, who is also married to a Marine Corps veteran with PTSD, I am kind of acutely aware of how much of a slap in the face this all is. Although, I'm not shocked or anything. I'm not, over here super offended about it because it's to be expected. We live in a skewed, backwards, inverted world, and the leaders of the world are in opposition to good because they side with evil. And that's really the main point of everything that I share, is for people to be aware of the epic battle between good and evil that we are living through. And you need to choose this day whom you will serve. And since I like to offer positive solutions whenever I can for the issues that I talk about, here is something interesting from Jordan Peterson that I think could be possibly very helpful for other people like me who experience PTSD.
So how does that work for running out trauma then? Because it's supposed to be therapeutic, but how is it not strengthening memories associated with trauma?
That's an excellent question. Well, James Pennebaker tested that. So imagine two theories. One is just write down everything that you can remember about the trauma and cry and be miserable and depressed while you do that, and that's cathartic. But then imagine that you write down everything you remember around the trauma, and then you go through a process like you would go through with our writing tool, where you organize it and you reduce it and you make it clear and comprehensible and you weave it into a narrative and you strip the emotion out of it while you're doing that, because you start to understand what happened. And it isn't catharsis. James Pennebaker tested this. So he had people write about their traumatic experiences. It usually made them feel worse for a 2-week period afterwards. 6 months later, they had visited the physicians far less frequently. So it's out of tyranny, into the desert, and then into the promised land. The more their written product revealed the cognitive processing, the better the effect of the traumatic narration.
This is the writing guide that he was talking about that you can find at essay.app/guide. Let me know how it goes if you try it out.
Thank you again so much for being here today. Since you liked the video enough to make it all the way to the end, don't forget to click the thumbs up and share with somebody else who would also find it interesting. Leave your comments below and we'll all have a conversation. If you really liked it, check out the link in the description for several different ways that you can support. Have a wonderful night, afternoon, morning, evening, whatever time zone you're in.